Is it possible to go from being an extrovert to an introvert, or an introvert to an extrovert? So for me, I went from being an extrovert to an introvert to an extrovert. What are you talking about? So let me unpack that. So if I rewind back, way back, from when I started school, first year of school to the third year of school, roughly, I described myself as an extrovert from what I can remember. I wasn't shy, I wasn't self-conscious, I was just being myself, and I remember having a lot of friends and feeling like the confident one out of the group. My friends would come to me and I'd be sort of the leader in the situations, and I was one of the oldest. My birthday's in September, so that maybe was something to do with it. I felt like the older person, that was my role. But I definitely would have described myself, if I knew what that meant at the time, as an extrovert. So throughout that time, there were certain situations that would happen that created these slight thoughts of doubt to come in, but it would never hold too much space in my mind. I would get a doubtful thought or an insecure thought, but it wouldn't become my dominant reality. It just sort of happened every now and again. But then as I got to year 3, those paranoid thoughts, those self-conscious thoughts, feeling embarrassed, those experiences became more and more, and then the balance tipped, and then I felt very introverted. I had a few situations happen that made me feel really embarrassed, and then my parents divorced. That sort of made me feel quite singled out from other people, because in my class there was a lot of children who had a mum and a dad in their family, so I just felt different from everybody. I also had a lot of health problems. There became a lot of examples in my life of how I was different and how things made me stand out. And even though in the past there was also examples of that, it didn't really cross my mind, or it didn't really necessarily take up a lot of space with my dominant thoughts. But then as I got to the third year of school, they would take a lot more of my attention. It's interesting because they started taking up more of my attention, more of those things actually started to happen. So I believe what you focus on grows, and that was a classic example. That was kind of how things became for me for around 10 years, 10-15 years from that, of just me feeling more and more introverted. I found it very difficult to speak to people. I felt like people were watching me. I felt very insecure. I felt like I was the centre of attention, but for the wrong reasons. I just wanted to be as invisible as possible, not give any reason for people to look at me. And like I said, I had a lot of health problems, and those health problems made me more visible than other people. Whereas in the past, those things were still there, but it didn't bother me that I had certain problems that other people didn't have. But when I felt more introverted, those problems gave me great shame, made me feel really embarrassed, really insecure. Yeah, it just made me just want to be invisible. I literally wanted the ground to swallow me up. Most days, that was just my dominant feeling. And then if I fast forward to sort of deal with feeling really insecure and really shy, I then took on bad habits. I would go out drinking a lot, and I just loved how alcohol made me feel. I loved how alcohol really subsided those insecure, shy feelings, and I felt like I could just be myself and a lot more confident and a lot more sure of myself. I found it really easy to speak to people. I developed this false sense of security through negative self-sabotaging habits. That's just what I clung to then for quite a lot of years, maybe around 9 years. I just clung to, the alcohol is giving me this feeling of being confident and being sure of myself that I can't experience when I'm sober. But through doing those habits, or through that time in my life, I met people who I really connected with, and I also met my boyfriend in that time, and I just felt really comfortable, and I felt we had things in common that I couldn't really necessarily speak to people about that in my previous circle. So I then became more and more comfortable being myself, and it's been a long process. It's not been easy at all, and it didn't happen overnight, but I did just find that the more I felt comfortable with this new circle of people who I met when I started uni, even though a lot of times it was whilst I was drunk and I was under the influence. Because we sort of bonded so much during those times, when I was sober, I felt like those people knew me more deeply than how I'd want people to know me before. Since then, I no longer drink, which has been a long process and it was difficult to let that go. But I realised that I need to stop hiding behind it and I need to walk on my own 2 feet in a sense. And I've experienced this extroverted feeling of confidence and being secure of myself when I'm drunk, but I'm now around people who I feel confident with, I trust, and I believe has my best interests at heart. So why can't I then try and show up as this version of me whilst I'm sober? So that's been a process, but I'm now 2 years sober and I'm so glad I did it. One of the best decisions I've ever made. I now don't even need to think about, oh, I've got nothing to hide behind or anything like that, because like I said, it's been 2 years. This is just my new normal. If I go to a bar or if I go to an environment where alcohol is being served, it doesn't feel weird anymore. Whereas when I sort of was newly sober, it felt like, oh, everyone's drinking, I'm kind of feeling a bit like I'm missing out here. Whereas now it's got so much experience of it that it's just literally normal. Like, and if people are drinking around me, that's completely fine. It doesn't make me feel weird or it doesn't make me feel like I'm standing out. It's just how it is. In sort of letting go of the substance that I was using to sort of hide behind, it's made me feel more confident just by doing that. That in itself really skyrocketed my confidence and my trust in myself, because I was accepting that I feel enough being sober. Like, at first it was difficult, and at first I didn't feel enough, and people are going to think I'm being really boring, am I not going to be fun anymore? But I think because it's been so long now, I've realised that I actually do have a lot of fun when I'm not drinking. Probably more fun maybe now, because I don't have to worry about the consequences that I did before, because even if I'd have a great night being drunk, I knew the next day would just be filled with so much shame, so much embarrassment. So if I sort of balance it out, like, I definitely feel like I have more fun now, because it's just the experience of the night. I don't have to worry about any repercussions. That's great, of course. When I say that I've gone from being an extrovert, introvert for a long time to now an extrovert, what's been the main thing is, like I mentioned, is the people I've been around. If this is you, I've been there. If you're an introvert right now and you're watching a video on how to be an extrovert, I've literally been there. Why can't I have what they have? But you do. You absolutely do. Like, they're not any particular different breed to you. Like, they're literally the same as you, but they are choosing to not focus so heavily on, oh, how am I going to be perceived, or I need to be a certain way, or what are they going to think? So you're the same as them, but you're just adding so many more unnecessary layers to your experience than what they are. So why can't you do that? You're actually wasting so much energy by overthinking all these things, and in wasting energy you're becoming a more diluted version of that they are. Because if you think about it, if you think about life as an extrovert, they are, for example, they go into a room full of new people, they're being their fullest self, they're just being their self, and they're not losing energy by thinking, oh, what if I say the wrong thing, who are they, how are they going to perceive me? They're not weakening their energy. So they're just being their full version of themselves, and it looks like they're super extroverted, it looks like they're super confident. If you went into the same situation, because you're having all these thoughts of worrying and self-doubt, that's taking up so much of your energy and your focus. You're becoming a diluted version of yourself, and therefore you look shy, you're feeling like you're being an introvert. Don't make the mistake of thinking that an extrovert has this superhuman ability that you don't have. You're literally the same, but you're just adding unnecessary layers to your experience. I do believe that it can be an overnight process, but it's not necessarily the easiest way to do it. So what I would suggest firstly, really helped me, was surround yourself with people who you know genuinely has your best interests at heart. Because if you're around those people, and those might be family, it might be close friends, it might be a partner, if you're around those people, like, they're not going to necessarily judge you or care if you do anything that's actually embarrassing or anything that seems strange, or if you like make a fool of yourself, or whatever these bullshit thoughts are telling you. If you put yourself around a circle of people that you trust and you feel safe with, then it doesn't matter. Experiment. Just try and break the narrative, trying to be this small person who takes up as little space as possible. Go and experiment and have fun with it. Try something new. Try and break up the narrative, but do it. I really suggest to do it with people who you feel has your back and has your genuine interests. It's a lot easier to do that. If you're finding yourself now feeling really introverted, but you're in a group of people who you find really gossipy or really critical of you, then of course it's going to be hard for you to just break into a new version and show up with a new energy. It is going to be hard. So I would really suggest you doing that with people who are more kind, more compassionate, and genuinely care about your well-being and your happiness. The next thing is really important to mention here is, even though this is about introverts and extroverts, I'm actually personally against this idea of putting yourself in a category. I see it a lot with many different things, like, oh, I have this, I am this. Be very, very mindful of. So this video comes with a word of warning. Stop putting yourself in categories. I understand that when we feel lost or insecure, putting yourself in a category can actually feel very comforting. For example, if you're feeling super anxious and then you read symptoms on anxiety, it can make you feel this level of comfort of, oh, I'm not necessarily weird, or this isn't only happening to me. This is actually a common thing and it's called anxiety. I understand why people tend to put themselves in categories and why they like to label things. I get the comfort behind it, and I get that maybe when we identify a category, it can then maybe help us find a solution. Because if we know what it is, it can then lead us to getting a solution. So I get the benefits of it. However, be very mindful of putting yourself in categories, because when you label yourself, for example, when you say to yourself, I am an introvert, it actually runs a lot deeper than just saying that. You are almost solidifying yourself to be a certain way. That can be super unhelpful, because it's almost like you saying, oh, I'm this way and that is how it is. There is no way to change it. This is how I am. It's almost like freezing yourself in a certain identity and a certain energy state, which I strongly believe we can break free from these labels and from these categories. Why do you need to be an introvert or an extrovert? Why? Because, for example, you have a group of best friends, and when you're around them, I'm sure that you feel very bubbly, you have a lot of energy, you feel really comfortable with them. So in that situation, you could be deemed as an extrovert. But say, for example, if you're around a new group of people you've never met before, or even a friend's family member's party, people you don't really know, in that situation you might look like an introvert. So why solidify an identity when we can actually be a lot more malleable than what our mind is telling us to be? We don't need to have a label, because each situation is different. We can be around different people. We could be feeling different on a certain day. Maybe we didn't have a lot of sleep the night before. Maybe we've just eaten loads of carby food, and maybe we've had a takeaway, and maybe we're just feeling a bit rubbish. We could have been ill recently. There's so many different factors. We're not just this one dimension being. We're multifaceted. Our personality, so many things about us. We're not just set in stone. So I would really urge you to be mindful before you're putting yourself in these categories. Do it with awareness that I'm going to put myself in this category temporarily if that brings you comfort. But be very mindful to not stay in this category for too long, and be mindful of your intention while you're putting yourself in this category. Yes, it might help you, and it might make you think this is going to lead you to finding solutions, being able to research, look online, look at forums even of people who share this label. But don't stay in this category for too long. Realise you can break free from these mental constrictions. You don't owe anyone to be one solid identity form, and you're actually doing yourself a disservice, I would say, by having a label. This video is to use my story as an example that you can go from being an extrovert to an introvert to an extrovert again. But there's another layer to this. Why do you even need to put yourself in a category? Also, if you say to yourself, I am an introvert, your mind will be sieving through all the examples of when you've been shy, or when you've been quote unquote embarrassing yourself, or when you've not known what to say, or when you said the wrong thing. You're just zoning in on that one label. Whereas if you say to yourself a different way of, oh, I feel a bit shy when I'm with new people, Again, that is a label, but it's more of a specific label than saying I am an introvert, which covers a massive bracket of experiences. So instead of just looking for examples to prove how you are this weaker version of yourself, try and do the opposite. Try and think of examples to prove to your mind of times when you've actually been really confident, of times when you've been really comfortable, of times when you've shown up with high energy, of times when you've made people laugh or you've had something good to say. Be very mindful of just zoning in on one way that you have been and realise that you're not one solid identity form. You can actually show up in many different ways if you want to. You don't owe anyone to just show up the exact same every time. And also know that you can break free these limitations at any time you want to. What I find really helpful is when you are around people and, for example, you really like something about them, you like maybe the way that they make other people feel, or you like how confident they are, instead of looking at the person thinking, oh, I'm not like this, I'm really shy, they have something I don't have, instead of listening to these limiting bullshit theories and ideas, just look at them objectively and think about what are they actually doing. So, for example, how are they holding their body? How are they speaking? What is their energy like? Just look at what you actually admire about them and think about ways that you can start to replicate that in your own life. So, for example, if you see a confident person, I would imagine that they'd be standing straight, tall, they'd be looking at people, giving eye contact. So instead of you ripping yourself apart and being really discouraged by this, see it as inspiration and actually take it one step further and try to replicate it. Bring this to the table the next time you have the opportunity to. And that leads me to the next point. Put yourself in these situations. If you want to be a certain way and if you want to push past certain limitations, you have to show up. You want to actually create the evidence that you are this person. And in order to create the evidence, you need to do it. Do the things that scare you, and it is so liberating, it is so freeing. So now, as a extrovert turned introvert turned extrovert, I'm now turned nothing. I'm now actually just me. I'm showing up as myself, and that can change during different situations, depending on who I'm with, depending on how I'm feeling the day, depending on how much I've been aligning with my practices and my habits, my diet, different things. And that's okay, because we can all show up differently. We don't need to be this one solid identity. Who are you choosing to show up as today? And more importantly, who are you showing up as right now? And that's all that matters. You can be whoever you choose to be, and it all starts with your energy. You are not told by those limiting thoughts of who to be and who to show up as. You can actually be the director of your life, and you can actually tell your own mind. You can actually show your own mind who you choose to show up as. You don't owe anyone anything to show up how you think you should, or how these limiting thoughts are making you feel or making you act. You have the full power and the full capability to just show up however you choose to, and in the way that makes you feel the way that you want to feel.